Hi everyone, this is Ted Bauman, editor of the Bauman Library here at Banyan Hill Publishing. Years ago, before we were called Banyan Hill, my dad, Bob Bauman, was one of the founders of the publishing house that eventually became Banyan Hill. Since he retired, he has done something that is one of his passions. He reads books, lots of them. And when he's finished with them, he puts them in a box and he FedExes them to me and to my siblings, and we read them. And today I thought I would go through and show you some of the books that I have in my library that I've read about the 1920s. Let's start with this one. This is a cultural history of the 1920s called Only Yesterday by Frederick Lewis Allen. One of the great things about modern history is that there's so many spaces for people to write about that you can write about very small things. And this is a book that discusses what daily life was like. Not just the flappers, not just the straw boater hats, not just the Prohibition, but the little things like what people ate, what kinds of entertainments they pursued, and that sort of thing. So if you really want to understand daily life in the 1920s, here's a good book to start. Now, of course, another big thing about the 1920s was Prohibition. During the 1920s, alcohol sales in the United States were illegal. And just like in the modern era with the war on drugs, people tried to find ways around that, and they generally succeeded. And this is a really good book that describes what that was like. It is, again, a cultural history, very similar to what will probably be written someday in the future about the war on drugs, particularly the war on cannabis, marijuana, which will almost certainly be looked back upon in very similar ways. But the book that really fascinated me was this one. It's called 1920, the Year of the Six Presidents. And that was a year in which both the incumbent president, Woodrow Wilson, and the president who won that election, Warren Harding, duked it out to become president with the involvement of some other people. Theodore Roosevelt, who had been president, Herbert Hoover, who would later be president, Calvin Coolidge, who, as Harding's vice president, became president when he died, and Franklin D. Roosevelt, who wanted to become president but had to wait until the 1930s when the Depression started. But what this reminded me of was the number of people trying to become president right now in the 2020 election, particularly on the Democratic side. We have, last count, over 20 people running for president. So yet again, another similarity between the 1920s and the 2020s. Who knows who'll win in 2020, but in 1920, it was Warren Harding. So that's just another way that the current decade shares similarities with the long ago 1920s. This is Ted Bauman. I'll speak to you again soon.